Welcome to another edition of the Heron Outlet. She is Alex Winley. I am Ian Hest. And Alex, another rough patch for Inter Miami as they fall midweek to New York Red Bulls 1-0 at home in Drive Pink Stadium. And the Boo Birds are definitely out and loud, even bringing so much as a banner last night, a tifo last night with the words Neville out on it. We'll get to all of this coming up. It now brings Inter Miami firmly into last in the Eastern Conference, sitting on just 15 points from 15 games played. Another losing streak, this time now into 4 games in the league. And we'll see if it can be stopped this Saturday as they try again against DC United. But we have to start, Alex, with the boos from last night as we record this on Thursday, with the general feeling around the fans right now, with the banner that was displayed, a big white banner in La Familia in the section with the words Neville out in black ink, just very simple and to the point. Your thoughts on the banner, your thoughts on the boos as this seems to be a very tensious point right now in the history of Inter Miami.
Well, yeah, for one, I don't think, in regards to the boos, I don't think they were directed towards Harvey Neville and specifically. I think it was just fan frustration from Phil Neville bringing on a fullback, essentially another defender instead of an attacking player like a Jake LaCava to push to get an equalizer or even a win. I don't think the boos were directed towards Harvey. It was probably they were directed towards his position more so than the player himself. I'm sure if, let's say, if there was another defender on the bench and and Neville brought on a center back, that the boos would have been directed towards that defender. So I don't think the boos were directed towards Harvey. More so Harvey being a defender and Inter Miami fans wanting to win, so they were confused to why Phil Neville didn't bring on an attacker in that circumstance. Number one. Number two, I understand the fans' frustration. There have been times where, yes, Miami did win their first two matches of the year. Pretty. I wouldn't say convincingly, but they beat Montreal and they beat a really good Philadelphia Union side who are now they're on the rebound, and I think they're fourth in the Eastern Conference now. And yeah, the soccer hasn't been great. Even before Gregory got and John Mata got injured, specifically New York City FC away. That game, they didn't play well either, and they had a full strength team with Gregory, with John Mata. That was just, the game where Gregory got injured. They didn't play well in that game either, and that's been a reoccurring theme under Neville. During his time at Inter Miami, they will go on these hot streaks where they'll grind out wins and they'll win, and then it'll fall so flat and hard so quickly where it's kind of like whiplash, where his teams have never been really consistent. And you can argue at the tail end of 2022 when Pozuelo and Higuain started to play better, that's the reason why that season was able to be salvaged, mainly because of the play on the field from the players and not necessarily his tactics. So I think the fans are just fed up with the constant hot and cold and hot and cold, and then the post match conferences where he's not really articulating, tactically why they're losing in detail compared to some of their other coaches. For example, I remember when Ezra Hendrickson, when they played the Chicago Fire, and Ezra Hendrickson really he called out. I don't think it's like a bluff, but he called out Neville and his tactics, saying, Miami. They can't, defend low and swing crosses and yada, yada, yada. And Neville got pretty offended at that, saying that that's not true. But the fact that the opposing coach was able to clock their route one style of football so quickly, and to this day it hasn't really changed. It's just in swing crosses, and Neville said it as much in his post match conference about how he expects every cross, he considers it a chance. So yeah, I think the fans are just fed up with the same old, no real tactical evolution in the final third, I should say. Just kind of stagnant cross and pray style of football, and it gets old to watch. And MLS is a really downhill league where physicality and speed and kind of reign supreme. So you don't even need technical players, but you just need to go for it sometimes. And sometimes Miami is just so passive in that regard that it gets boring, and the fans, they've seen this since when Neville was appointed in 2021, and now 2023 here we are, and yeah, it's rough for the fans. So I can understand their frustration, but Yeah, in regards to the booing, it's them being fed up, and I don't think the booing was directed towards Harvey. I think it was more so about the situation and him bringing out a defender. And yeah, it's just, around the league, even we've seen, LAFC and New York CFC, LA Galaxy and New York City FC fans, confront their front offices and their players on the field. So I do feel like with Inter Miami and La Familia, it's only a matter of time till they get to that point too.
I agree with you on the frustrations of the fans. I think that that is entirely that's why you're paid a ticket as long as it's done within normal within we're not breaking any laws here and we're not going into we're not going into really bad territory. You're allowed to voice your displeasure and Phil had said in the post match press conference that he wanted responsibility for it, that he didn't feel that it was good enough. I will get into that because I do, again, I completely understand the frustration of the fans. I am going to disagree with you on the booing of Harvey Neville because I think that what this is a CYA moment for a lot of people who saw how that went over and are now trying to say, oh, it was because of the defender. There were the only options left on the bench when Harvey Neville was substituted were Nick Marsman, you're not throwing on a goalkeeper, Chris McVeigh, Noah Allen, Harvey, or Jake LaCava, who has not played a single solitary second of MLS minutes this year. So I don't necessarily know if people were screaming for Jake LaCava over Harvey Neville. To me, it sounded like they were booing Harvey coming on. And he came on for Kristoff. We all know that Harvey Neville is far more attacking of a player than Sergei is. So, I mean, I don't really necessarily buy that argument that it was done out of a tactical situation. You were left with Kamal Miller and Ian Frey playing center back, and Ian Frey has been playing almost a defensive midfielder his whole time. So it was really unloading the bench as offensively minded as he could have done. And I think what happened if I'm playing, sort of the results here is that people saw that the reaction was poor, and now they're turning around and trying to say, "Oh, no, it's because of the tactics. It's because of the tactics." Listen, I think that you agree that Harvey Neville has not gotten here because he's Phil's son. Harvey Neville was a quality MLS Next player last year. He deserves to be on a first team MLS roster. It just so happens that this is the situation of it. Has he been great at times? No, I've shared my criticisms of Harvey Neville. I think that he has a lot to improve in his game. He's still a young kid. He's still got a lot to improve, just like I think that a lot of the kids have a lot more to go. But I don't like to see sort of these things be married to each other. It is unfortunately the problem of when you're a player and your dad is the coach. That is an inevitable sort of situation. So it's not the fault of the fans, but I do. I have so much respect for La Familia that I don't like having that feeling of, come on, guys, like, don't take it out on. And yes, a lot of people pointed out he's a professional. He's not a kid. We're using the word kid a lot here. He is an adult and he is a professional soccer player. So boo his performance, but don't boo who his dad is. That's I just want to wrap a bow on that. As for the signage, I think you and I had talked for the past couple of weeks that we felt that the trajectory was getting towards a point where a banner like that was going to be shown if they couldn't turn things around. And I think that the results in this season warrant him having this pressure. You bring up a great point in that he hasn't had the transparency in the press conferences and talking to the fans, because we are the vessel of which the fans get the information. We ask the questions. We're the middleman here, and maybe that's a fault of me asking questions. Maybe that's a fault of us asking questions. But we haven't gotten a lot of candor and a lot of openness about what these problems are diagnosed as inside the room. We can see with our eyes what we think the problem is, but we haven't gotten a lot of candor from Phil Neville specifically on what the issues are. And when you don't know, or you're not expressing what those issues are, it can lead to even more frustration. So I completely think that the fans are 100% in the correct in their feelings, because this has not been good. This team is bottom of the table. I would say, in the grand scheme of things, they were in the playoffs last year. They are currently in the quarterfinals and a favored to move on to the semifinals for the first time in Open Cup history, a competition that we have long said for several years they should be prioritizing. I do see both sides of the coin there because a lot of the teams like Montreal or not Montreal. Well, Montreal last year was very good, but like Chicago, who let Ezra Hendrickson go. To your point, they would love to have their Open Cup run is just as far in the quarterfinals right now. They would love to have made the playoffs last year, and they're now making those moves because they didn't reach those goals that Miami had last year. And I think that that's why he got the 1 year extension. He is under a 1 year extension, so this is sort of a play as you go situation. And so I get where fans are frustrated. I get where Phil needs a little more candor and honesty, but also I don't think that this ship is completely sunk. It's taking on water, but you're 2 games out of sixth. So this could change very quickly. It's not the sky is falling Chicken Little that I feel is trying to be portrayed sometimes for a flair for the dramatic.
Yeah, and I agree that the standings, they are bottom, but they're a win away from getting back into ninth place. So, in regards to that, yeah, they just need to go on a decent win streak or 1 or 2 wins, and they're back in it. But I think for the fans, the soccer's just been not really aesthetically pleasing and really boring to watch, and there's no real identity or cohesiveness. And if you ask someone that what's the identity of Inter Miami under Phil Neville, I don't think anyone will be able to give you anything except for crossing the ball and failure to really create in the final third. And that's been a recurring theme with this team, and that's why I believe the fans are frustrated. They want to see more. They want to see more, not just fight or ruthlessness. They want to see cohesion and coherent tactics and an identity that people can say, oh, when Miami play, this is what they're going to bring, and teams are going to have to try to beat that. We haven't seen that with an Inter Miami team in any well, this season specifically, and I think the fans are just upset, and then you add that with there's a lot of Argentines down here in Miami and the Messi rumors, and they want to see a team that Messi would be appealed to be coming into and playing. And right now, Miami are not playing a brand of football that looks good for anyone, let alone Messi. So I think just the fans are just frustrated, and they want more from the team, and they want good soccer to watch. And right now it's not easy to watch, and it's not fun, and Neville even said as much.
Let's talk tactics because this was another game, more than 60% possession for Miami, but yet got absolutely obliterated in the expected goals category, absolutely obliterated in shots and shots on target. Miami only had 1 shot on target the entire game. That was the missed penalty by Leo Campana. So outside of a penalty, they did not have a single shot on goal. That seems to be if there is the style of play and tactics that you were alluding to a moment ago, Alex, that seems to be the style of play. Own possession, but not doing a lot with it. It's very slow. It almost looks like the grass is like too high at times because the ball just goes so slowly, and the build-up play for Miami is so slow that they're like trudging through the motions. There were a sense of some tired legs out there. You could sort of see it towards the end, which isn't surprising given the month of May that they had, the amount of games that they had, and this run where they are a bit shorthanded and they are playing with guys that have done 7 games in a month in some regards, in some cases. So tactically, it just seems very slow and very monotonous. And I don't know where the creativity or the quickness or the speed comes from to change this up. I don't look to the bench and say, oh, you have an Ariel Lassiter. Oh, you have a Bryce Duke. Oh, you have a Emerson Rodriguez there that can change the pace and make this a little more rejuvenated. How would you, in this, with the personnel that they have, play a style that at least moves the ball a little quicker, a little more, vigor, a little more passion, and a little more flair?
Well, for one, start the youth products. Kramashki, David Ruiz, Aaron Frey. They do show passion out there. I think at the end of the game last night, Ian Frey got into it with one of the players, so it shows that they care. They have passion. They're local, kids, and they want to play for the shirt and the badge, and they're gonna uh, show some passion out there. And I think starting those three specifically, and they've done well for 18, 19, 20 year olds. So yeah, you start them, they'll show passion. David Ruiz, Kramashki, and Freed, they've all shown that they're able to play at an MLS level. So why not play them? I don't know if that comes at the expense of like a Dixon Arroyo sitting, and Arroyo has been good during his time, but yes, it starts with starting the three youth players. Number two, I think you have to make a decision between Joseph and Campana right now. Yeah, Campana looks woefully out of form. That missed penalty and just some wayward touches, and he just looks a little slow right now. And I know he's back from injury, yeah, but he's just looking a little lethargic, and he's a DP player, and you got to be scoring those penalties. So I would choose either Campana or Joseph, and maybe not start the both of them. I know you want more offensive firepower on the field, but Joseph and Campana take up the same spaces on the feet on the pitch, so you can't have them just mashing each other's game like that. So you got to choose one or the other. If you play Campana, maybe you can play a more aerial game. You play Martinez, you have to play to the ball with his feet and help him combine 1-2 touches. So if you pick one striker or the other, you got to sit one of them at this point just to make it coherent. Number three, I would play just the normal 4-2-3-1. You have enough wingers on the team, and you have enough strikers and every personnel to play that. Just stick with the formation, work through it, and just see where it goes. Really, I think you have enough. You have Robert Taylor, Coco Jean, Stefanelli, even Kramashki last night. He showed that he can maybe play on the wing. Just try to work through it. One system. Ian Frey, Arroyo as a double pivot, Kramashki maybe on the wing or as a 10. I don't know. Stefanelli on the left, somewhat, or Robert Taylor, Coco Jean. You have options. Even Jake LaCava, it's played there, I think, for a couple of times. So you just got to stick with formation and play through it, and not, some games it's the back three, some games it's, the 4-2-2-2. And, when the starting 11s come out, 9 times out of 10, it's really indistinguishable, and we can't really decipher what formation they're coming out in. So stick with the formation. So play the kids. Stick stick with Joseph or Campana, and stick with a formation. I think Ian, I don't know if you remember, but we said the same things during like Diego Alonso's like tenure, where he was changing like the formation every other game, and it was just no consistency. And Neville's been pretty good about the formations, but as of late, it just seems like he's throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And yeah, at the end of the day, um, they can play the same formation, but tactically, if they're still crossing the ball in the box and not having that final third, that ball, final ball in the final third, then what's the
Right.
difference?
Right.
So,
Well, and you make a couple of good points there. So Campana, according to Phil, is the designated penalty taker. He had said that he was surprised when Campana gave the ball to Joseph to get that 100th goal or 99th goal. I forget which one was first. But that he had given him the ball. Campana is supposed to take it there, which I find a little interesting. I'm never a big fan of lefty penalty takers. I just think that it's far easier to save a lefty than it is a righty, and the numbers back that up. But yeah, so I definitely agree with you on the two striker thing. It hasn't worked out. Joseph last night didn't have a single shot. Only had 23 touches the entire game. That was less touches than any player, outfield player that played 90 minutes on either Inter Miami or Red Bulls. So he's not really been getting involved. Campana's still looking to get into whatever form he might find himself in. But the problem that you have with the two strikers is it also puts a lot of other players out of position. You mentioned the 4-2-3-1. Well, they're not doing it with the two strikers right now. They're doing more of a 4-4-2 and a hybrid, however you want to make that, which a lot of times, like you had mentioned, puts Kramashki out on the wing as almost like a right winger. That's not a natural position for him. And if you're going to start putting him in an unnatural position, if you're going to start putting Ian Frey in an unnatural position, if you're going to start putting Nicola Stefanelli in an unnatural position, if you're going to start putting all these guys into different areas that aren't inherently where they find joy in the game, simply because you have big name Joseph Martinez and DP Leo Campana. I struggle to think if there isn't a better use of the way to do it. Even if it's that 4-3-1-2 that we saw at times last year and you play super narrow. I haven't seen a lot of that. I don't know if that's because Pizarro has not been healthy and they're waiting to see him come back because he's found a lot of joy in that spot. Robert Taylor being resigned to the bench has been a little interesting, but he's been out of form as well. So I think that there are options here. You're right where the consistency matters. And I do like the idea of playing the kids more. Ian Frey looked for me tremendous in his first times as a defensive midfielder. That was a lovely surprise. If he develops there, my lord, the sky is already limit for that kid, and that would be just an unbelievable wrinkle to his lineup. But I think that you have to take a long, hard look. It was a little before this. It was, I believe, in mid-May last year when Gonzalo got sat down, and Phil did it for a little bit with Joseph, and that was that short spurt that they had. But I think that Phil needs to sit down and sort of say to himself, is this two striker thing working? Can we get it to work? How long do we need to wait for it to work? Because you're almost to midway through the season. You played 15 games out of a 34 game season. And so far, you haven't had a game where both of them scored, like in the same game. So you would have thought through 15 games, you'd at least get one of those. I think you only have 3 or 4 games where either one of them has scored in a game. So it hasn't been good. I mean, Inter Miami has conceded 6 most in the Eastern, or 6 fewest, in the Eastern Conference. So it's not the goals that they're giving up. They've only given up 19 or I think 19 goals so far this season. But they've only scored 14 goals in 15 games. It's the offense. The offense has not been good enough. And when you're having 60% possession time and time and time again, and yet your 60% possession is 1, 2, maybe 3 shots. I asked him, you brought up earlier, I asked him in the post game that he comes out and says, well, I thought we had 3 great chances in the first 15 minutes. Well, what are you seeing that the rest of us are missing? Because if you're counting crosses, that's fine, but those are low percentage opportunities. And yeah, I know that not all XG only counts for shots if you actually wind up taking a shot. But we're being very liberal with the term chances on some of these because a counterattack to me, if the other team's catching up to you before you take a shot, was that really a chance? I mean, you got it to the 18, but I don't really know if he's getting as many chances as being portrayed to us in some of these press conferences to say that I don't know. Did you see 3 or 4 chances in the first 15 minutes? Maybe one outside of the penalty. But I think the offense is where you have to focus right now.
Yeah, and honestly, Ian, that's the annoying thing. The game shouldn't have to, be, one on 3 or 4 chances. You should be able to make more than just 3 or 4. You shouldn't have to just rely on 3 or 4 chances to win a game. It should be far more than that. Honestly, some of the better teams in MLS, they're making 4 or 5 chances from one player at least. So having 3 or 4 chances as a team, that's not a good strategy to win games. That's just simply not enough. And then people wonder why maybe Martinez isn't performing to the level that we know that he can, is because he's not getting the service. And you can't just rely on 3 or 4 maybe high low XG chances from outside the box that could go in, or maybe a scrappy ball loose in the box. You gotta be. They need to be just consistent chances that the strikers can get into a rhythm and the flow of the game, and and potentially score. So the 3 or 4 chances, whenever Neville says that, I have to push back and say, oh, well, hold on, that's not how you should play a game. You should have far more than 3 or 4 chances throughout the entire match. Like a singular player should be able to create 3 chances on his own, and it shouldn't be just a match wide thing. And that's what's the frustrating thing. Neville, I think he believes that they have 1 or 2 good chances they should be able to score, and yes, you should be clinical, but some strikers, they need more chances than that. Sometimes, I'll take, for example, there's a player called Lautaro Martinez, who I'm sure you guys know. He plays for Inter, and I believe some of his stats are like, he's like the highest scorer from first touch, strikes into the net, and he's really good at first time finishing. And I think that's what Neville kind of expects with this Inter Miami team, just first time, finishing with their chances, and that's with Inter Miami in this position, that's not how it's going to work. They need multiple chances to get on the score sheet, and they did have a couple of good ones. Yes, that one Joseph chance where he maybe should have finished that, and they should have been up 1-0, the Campana penalty. But other than that, Ian, like I can't remember a decent chance besides that. Maybe 1 or 2 strikes, but
There was the
yeah, having
Joseph
three or four
dummy.
chances throughout a game.
Yeah, there was the Joseph dummy that they
Right.
had a they
But
had a 3-on-2 on.
yeah.
But you're right. You're picking 1 or 2 that you're saying, are we gonna count this? Like, was that half a chance? Do 2 half of chances equal a whole chance? Right? Like we're trying to find where these mythological chances are coming from, and I know that there is a certain level of the eye test, and I know you can't just go by the stats, but the stats are a helpful tool to notice, especially over the course of 15 games, nearly half a season, where you are. And for Inter Miami, it's not very good. They had an XG of 2.8 in the very first game against Montreal. Since then, they have not had a single solitary game where they've had an XG above 1.5. Not in the wins, not in the losses. In 14 straight games, they've had an XG of 1.5 or fewer. Over the 15 games this season, they have a total XG of this season of 14.1. Do you know where that ranks in all of MLS? Dead last, 29th out of 29 teams. And so the offense, it has to come on the shoulders of where tactically Phil needs to get them into the right spaces, but it also has to come down on Leo Campana, who just signed a designated player deal. It has to come down on Joseph Martinez, who said that he wanted to revitalize his career here in Miami. It has to come down to where they're going to create. I mean, it has to come down seriously to Pizarro, who's in the last year of a contract, and we haven't seen in a month because he's on the bench and trying to figure out his injury. That happened in the Gold or in the Open Cup, I believe, against Miami SC. How long ago does that feel? So mm-hmm. I really just where I almost understand the most the frustration of this team. I've talked about it a million times on this show before. I'm an offensive minded guy, so every single time I'm watching this team just not even look like they went down 1 goal. That was game over. When they gave up the goal against Red Bulls, that was the nail in the coffin, because you could see it. And they just don't seem to have the urgency or that killer instinct or that punch, that fight, that joy, that passion that we expected this group of players, but Inter Miami as a whole, to identify with. That should be Inter Miami's MO. I've long said this. Inter Miami, if they lose, they should lose 6-5. They should never lose these 1-0 games with a missed penalty and 1 total shot. That is not Inter Miami football. It never should be. That game should never be played in Drive Pink Stadium, in Miami Freedom Park, in Tropical Park, in FIU or FAU or anywhere in South Florida. That is not South Florida soccer. That is not at all the style of play that anybody wants to see. So if it's not happening, you got to figure out a way to get. I'm fine if this team is not a winner. If this team's going to go down 6-5. Seriously, you got to go. You have one of the best goalkeepers in the league, probably the best goalkeeper in the league, who just got called up to
Literally.
the national team too.
Called up to the
Yeah,
national team.
we'll get to in a sec. We'll get to at the end of the show. But like, just go. Like, DeAndre Yedlin said in the post game also that MLS is such a counterattacking league, and you don't want to get caught too far out because then you'll get countered very easily. He's 100% right. He is absolutely right all the way on that. And you know what? Do it anyway. You got the best goalkeeper in the league. You got a world-class player in DeAndre Yedlin who's faster than probably 99% of anybody playing. Go for it. Show that passion, show that fire, show that grit, and score a goal. And if it winds up getting it countered, have some faith that you have the best goalkeeper in the league. Yeah, I just don't see why we're trying to play three-dimensional chess here when you have the players to just say, go out and play and have some fun.
Yeah, and that's why, personally for me, that's why the loss of Ariel Lassiter in Montreal hurt so much because, even if he wasn't, a starter material, he could still have, he still had the capability of coming off the bench and, providing that pace that you need in MLS. And now he's over there playing really well for Montreal. And, I think the trade maybe worked out in the end for both teams with the 1.3 million in GAM, and Como Miller's been really good for Miami despite, their record. You need players like that, dynamic players coming off the bench to just give you some pace or even physicality. Like Emerson's on loan to I think Santos Laguna in Mexico, and I don't believe he's played that much. So, maybe, I don't know if they can recall him and give him another shot, but I don't know. But it's just they need some dynamicism. Excuse me, dynamic. Just any dynamic player coming off the bench right now, they don't have. And yeah, like Yedlin said, it's just it's a physical counterattacking speedy league, and trying to play possession play based soccer may work for some teams, but for Miami, I think they just need to go and just throw it just throw everything to the wall and see what goes, at this point. Because I think some of Miami's most dangerous chances came when the game was super wide open for them the first, 20 minutes, and they had it, and it was, open from end to end from both teams. And yeah, that was a crazy couple of first 15 minutes. So, I think that we always have this conversation from, is Miami going to be a counterattacking team or possession based? And right now, I think Neville wants them to be this possession-based side that plays, flowing soccer. But right now, they need to go with what they have on the roster, and that's why I push back against people saying, "Well, look at the roster; it's not very good." Actually, I push back against that. There's a lot of good, young, talented players here. You have players who played in the Champions League, Europa League, in Europe, and Stefanelli Kristoff. Kamal Miller went to a World Cup with Canada, so there's quality in the squad. They just need to be put in the right places to perform well and tactically be given a strategy that works for them, which I think is just play wide open and just go for it.
I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you, and this is going to sound crazy because for a lot of people, but MLS All-Star voting just opened up. Inter Miami could have up to 3 All-Stars: Drake, Kamal Miller, and possibly DeAndre Yedlin. I mean, so a team that's starting potentially 3 All-Stars is playing like this. Yeah, no, they have the talent, and they have the talent. That talent is defensively. So, yeah, I understand that. Again, it's not the end of the world. Like I mentioned, they have a game in hand against Charlotte. They are 6 points behind Charlotte. So, and that's for 7th in the East. So there's 6 points between 6th place Columbus and 15th place Miami. And so there's still a long way to go. There's still a little more than half a season. They got DC United this weekend. Let's talk about the Open Cup coming up next weekend or in the middle of next week. And then they have New England Revolution after that before finally this long stretch of games comes to an end and they'll get a couple of weeks off. Let's look ahead a little bit to those games coming up. The first one will be DC United this coming Saturday from Drive Pink Stadium. And an interesting game that brings Christian Benteke in for DC United. Wayne Rooney, who will coach that all-star team, has them playing pretty good soccer right now. They're up to 8th in the Eastern Conference. They got 5 wins, 5 draws, and 6 losses. But a lot of middle of the road results in their past five: one win, one loss, and three draws. So they're sort of getting by to get by right now. And a team that likes to play a very wide style is going to stretch Miami out a lot in this game. They're going to really create a lot of room. And Miami, this might be one good game for them to stay compact, for them to play that Route One soccer. Because if you do try and play those wide flanks against DC, that can be a recipe, like we mentioned, to get counterattacked with Christian Benteke in the end, scoring a goal against you. So, how do you see this? This was a DC United team that was the bottom of the Eastern Conference last year that really gave up towards the end of the year. And you know that we all remember what happened with Taxi Fountas last year, and that situation that you know still feels a little bit raw, I think, and a little bit fresh in people's bad taste in their mouth. If I'm mixing my metaphors, we'll see what goes on with that. But I definitely think that this is a DC United team that, despite the four straight losses, Inter Miami should go in with an attacking mindset and with a smart game plan, that is able to understand that, yeah, again, they might need like 60% possession of this, but they have to do something with it. Enough of this just holding the ball and looking, passing and looking. That has been a staple of Inter Miami for far too long.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's going to be a super wide open game as well. DC, they play, this with under Wayne Rooney, they play like a 4-4-2 sometimes, or a back three with wing backs, and yeah, it could be super wide open if Miami play that, possession based style and try to break them down. They're going to lose, and yeah, get countered on. So I think they have to counter themselves, and go with, maybe go with Joseph, maybe actually go with Campana, maybe up top with his physicality and his aerial ability, try to knock balls down, get the second ball, then build from there. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a super physical game, super wide open. But I don't know if Miami are playing at home, but
Yeah,
yeah, they can change the tide this weekend if they get a win here. So let's see how that goes. But yeah, it's going to be a wide open game.
let's talk about Taxi Fountas. This will be the first time that Inter Miami does play against DC United since that incident last year. Fountas has come off the bench, also started a couple games for DC United early on in the season. We've litigated it. I think that Miami made their feelings known about what happened, how the league addressed it. I think that we've spoken about that. So I don't want to get into it from that standpoint. I do want to get into it from a team standpoint, that the potential for him to come on, whether it be in the 70th, 80th minute, to keep composure, how that might, how it's going to be discussed, I'm sure, with team leadership this week, and how they feel, whether or not Wayne Rooney decides to hold him out, how the fans are going to react to his inclusion. Dante Van Zier played and started for Red Bulls, and I don't know if that's specifically because his racial incident wasn't against Inter Miami, but he did something very similar earlier this year and suffered a suspension because of it. And now Taxi Fountas, who did have that incident with Miami last year, finds himself coming in, and just how you think DeAndre Yedlin, who was probably the most still on the roster, most effective because Damian Lowe has been traded. How you think that this might play out?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Taxi will start. I think I believe if yeah, I think he'll start. Damian Lowe is no longer on the team, and I think Ame Mabika was also in that
Yeah.
incident as well. They're both not on the team anymore. I know DeAndre Yedlin wasn't within earshot, but yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't think he'll play. He won't be on the bench, and yeah, I think it is what it is. MLS didn't find anything, but Inter Miami were sure of what they heard. You mentioned Dante Avancer playing last night, and nearly scoring a couple of times, and he served his time, and yeah, I think he had like 6 game suspension or something like that. So yeah, I think Taxi will probably. Start and play, and I don't think anything of it will really happen.
All right, let's move on to the U.S. Open Cup, which is, as it stands, Miami's best chance at hardware in this season. They are now on to the quarterfinals of the U.S. Open Cup, where they will take on the upstart USL Championship team, Birmingham Legion, one of two USL Championship teams that were made it into moving on and excited here in the quarterfinals. You know, Birmingham is kind of an interesting case study for MLS teams, and the fact that, you know, very well coached team, but they're not doing very well in the USL Championship. I think they've lost like 3 or 4 straight in the USL Championship. Their lone win recently coming against Charlotte, and that was a home game for Birmingham. Miami will have to go and travel to Alabama for that game in what probably is the biggest game of the season so far. I mean, I know that fans want to do well in the league, but this U.S. Open Cup, in the way that it is right now, is the best chance to make CONCACAF Champions League. And Miami is one of 8 teams left, and really has a chance of they're 3 wins away from being in the CONCACAF Champions League. For all of this, you know, all of this feeling that the fans have right now, they are 3 wins away. One of them is guaranteed against a USL team. And so you'd have to say that this is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best chance that Inter Miami has to win a trophy, get into CONCACAF Champions League. You saw what that did for Orlando last year, where they were able to go out and sign some big players because of it. And so to be able to do that, I think, is a very important milestone for this team and for this club and for the fans. I would love if the fans got behind this run a little bit more. I know the Open Cup can be a little bit bizarre at times, but now we're getting down to the nitty gritty of it. And this is a huge opportunity for Inter Miami to be playing some serious football and go for a trophy here.
Yeah, I think at this point, with the regular season looking bad, but they can still get into playoff position. The US Open Cup's probably their only real chance of getting silverware, unless, you know, their turn in MLS, their form in MLS changes dramatically. So because MLS Cup is a bit of a far shot for them. So I think with Birmingham, you got to take them seriously. We've seen other MLS teams get knocked out by lower league teams and USL teams. I don't want to call them lower league because, you know, the whole pro rel thing, but USL sides. Orlando, I think, you know, I don't know if they were knocked out by a USL team or they were just knocked out in general, but the defending champions, they're knocked out. So I think it's so see, there you go. A lot of big time teams from MLS were knocked out by other MLS teams and other USL sides. So Miami have a good shot of, you know, grinding to that final and seeing how it goes, even though their MLS play is not too good. So you take the silverware you can get. Even if you have a bad league form, you can go to US Open Cup and maybe do some damage.
I mean, I really think that this is a huge opportunity. Orlando was not in a playoff position for a lot of last year as well. They snuck into the playoffs with just as much as Miami did. They were a spot below Miami in the standings, and yet they wound up winning the U.S. Open Cup, and they beat a USL team in the final. That mattered to them. They packed that arena. They cared that much. It was their first trophy, and you know, I'm sure Miami fans heard of the smack talk from Orlando fans. Why not return the favor and win it the year after? I think that this is a great opportunity. And I know that there's the frustration currently around the club that's dampening a little bit of it. But I'd love for this to be really something to hang your hat on. This is the oldest club competition or cup competition in the U.S. I think that there's great opportunity here, and definitely for however frustrated you can be in MLS league play this year, you just need to be one of the top 9 teams to make the playoffs. There's 15 of them, so only 6 teams are not making the playoffs. And if you can go for some silverware, if you can go for your first ever trophy, we're not going to count the Carolina Challenge Cup anymore. You really have the opportunity there. So that game on Wednesday, they will play. If they do win, they'll play in the semifinals. The winner of Cincinnati hosting the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, who's the only other USL Championship team And so, yeah, Cincinnati would definitely be a tough one. Pittsburgh would be another USL opponent. So we'll definitely be watching and have a lot to talk about on next week's episode. Alex, before we go, I do want to close with the U.S. men's national team announcing earlier on Thursday that Drake Callender is called up to the Nations League roster, the upcoming semifinals and finals that'll be taking place coming up in just a couple of weeks, actually. Drake, one of 4 goalkeepers that was selected for it. It's his second time being called up into a camp. He has yet to appear for the U.S. men's national team, but very nice that he's now clearly in the player pool for the U.S. men's national team in these important games. Also, the preliminary roster for the Gold Cup came out for the USA and for Canada this morning. Canada does have Kamal Miller, who is expected to start for Team Canada, as he did for them during the World Cup. Drake Callender also on that preliminary roster for the Gold Cup, and DeAndre Yedlin selected for the preliminary Gold Cup roster as well. So big congratulations to all of them. Alex, your thoughts on Drake, on Kamal, and on DeAndre?
Yeah, really good for them. You know, it's always good to have national team players within your club team, and it just shows that there is quality within the Inter Miami squad that they keep getting called up to represent their country. So I wish them the best of luck. We will all be watching. Well, from the American side, you know, Nations League semifinal against Mexico. See how that goes. I think it'll be a good game. Mexico will want to, you know, show they're under a new coach and a new era for them, so they're going to want to kind of get some revenge from the Nations League final that they got beat in I think it was 2020 or 2021. So it'll be a good match, and let's see how that goes.
Yeah, also would be remiss if I forgot that Sergei Kristov also called up to the Ukrainian
Yes.
national team coming up for their Euro qualifiers. They'll take on, I'm just looking now, they'll take on Malta and North Macedonia in those 2 games. Those games June 16th and 19th, and a good opportunity for Ukraine and for Sergei to represent his country that's going through such a tough time. Before we go, also want to congratulate David Ruiz, Eddie Azcona, and Israel Boatwright on a job well done in the U20 World Cup. Their teams, the Dominican Republic and Honduras, they represented very well. David Ruiz in wonderful fashion scored and got a red card as well, so good for him. And Eddie Azcona captaining the Dominican Republic side. Great job from them. Good to see them back with Inter Miami and entered right away into last night's game. David Ruiz and Eddie Azcona both getting minutes in that. Again, Saturday, it is DC United, 7:30 from Drive Pink Stadium. We'll have all the coverage here for you on the Heron Outlet. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on our Substack, the heronoutlet.substack.com, on our TikToks and all of our socials, wherever you can get that and wherever you get your podcasts. She is Alex Winley, and for our producer, Andres and Austin Robillard, I am Ian Hess. This is the Heron Outlet. See you back here this time next week.